Palm oil, a multi-billion-dollar industry with a pretty bad reputation. It's been blamed, among other things, for wiping out rainforests, pushing animals such as the orangutan towards extinction. But is a ban or boycott the answer? The views of some environmental groups may surprise you. Hello, welcome to Roundtable. I'm David Foster. It is the cheapest vegetable oil to produce. By 2022, the global market for palm oil is expected to more than double in value to $88 billion. Is the price too high when it comes to the impact on the environment, or is this particular oil actually a better alternative than other products when it comes to feeding the world's needs?
It's an ingredient food and consumer companies don't seem to want to quit. Despite high-profile campaigns about the damaging effects of palm oil, environmental groups say many aren't keeping their promise to use sustainable supplies. Why is a greener source of palm oil so elusive? The palm oil industry has a bad reputation, especially in Indonesia and Malaysia, where over 80% of global production is centred. It's a versatile substance and demand is booming. US government figures show consumption more than tripled from 17 million tonnes in 1996 to 60 million tonnes last year. And by 2022, the global market is expected to more than double in value to $88 billion. But its production is notorious for wiping out rainforests, accelerating climate change and driving orangutan and other animals towards extinction. Greenpeace says a rainforest the size of a football pitch is torn down in Indonesia every 25 seconds, and palm oil continues to drive the destruction. Land clearing practices are also linked to widespread forest fires, which have become an environmental disaster in Indonesia. Palm oil can be found in countless everyday products, and it's cheaper to produce than the alternatives. Other plant oils like soybean require as much as 9 times more land and need more fertilizer and pesticides. That's why many campaigners recognise a boycott won't work and instead want producers to clean up their industry and for consumer companies to stick to commitments to source sustainable supplies. Greenpeace has singled out Wilmar, the world's largest palm oil refiner and trader.
We are here to stop this shipment of dirty palm oil from being transported because this is complicit to the massive deforestation happening all over the world and happening here in Indonesia.
Greenpeace says 25 palm oil producing groups have destroyed more than 130,000 hectares of natural forest in Indonesia since 2015, despite pledges by big brands and supplies. Indonesia's president recently signed a moratorium on new licenses for palm oil plantations. And Malaysia has also said it wants to maintain current forest levels and stop further palm oil expansion. But millions of people work in the industry and many more rely on its income.
It might kill our livelihood because most of the smallholders in Malaysia depend on oil palm.
The market for sustainable palm oil is growing, but it's still only a small fraction of overall sales. Why has public awareness and pressure on the industry had limited results? And why are commitments to produce and source cleaner and greener supplies so hard to keep?
I'm very pleased to say that joining us from Amsterdam we have Rolf Schipper, campaigner at Friends of the Earth, to Swinbrook in Oxfordshire, where we see Andrew Mitchell, director at Global Canopy, an environmental research group. With me at our roundtable, Helen Buckland from the Sumatran Orangutan Society and Darrel Webber, chief executive of what is called Roundtable on Sustainable Palm Oil. Thanks very much indeed. Darrel, let me ask you first of all, sustainable. Does it mean hurting no one, no animal and no land? What does it mean?
Well, I think for now, the definition of sustainable is do no harm to all those stakeholders that you mentioned, people, planet, and profit. And in the future, I think we want to go from do no harm to do good, be a net positive.
How's that possible?
It can be possible. Right now, a lot of the focus has been on zero deforestation, trying to avoid deforestation for the commodity, trying to avoid, or not to avoid, but to remove abuse of workers, to remove land conflict with local communities. So that's the new do no harm part. But more and more we see our platform as a convener for doing providing a net positive benefit. Example, one of the happy unintended consequences of our movement is the creation of these national standards of sustainable palm oil. Just a few years ago, sustainability was a foreign word in the industry. And now, at the governmental level, Indonesia and Malaysia have decided to create their own
Let me
standards.
put this to the two gentlemen we have on Skype, and to you, Rolf, first of all. Does this idea of sustainability fit with your idea of what is workable, or is it window dressing?
Well, the thing, I mean, of course, it's always a good initiative to try to make the sector more sustainable. But let me tell you, I was in Indonesia just a few weeks ago, standing in a village in the middle of a rainforest. And I was touched by the story of those people whose area is forest and whose village is literally raised by a palm oil plantation that is coming up, without consulting them, without paying them any money. And this is just one example where I was at this time. But you see this happening everywhere. And then telling those villages that the company is a member of RSPO, what good does it do to them? So you see that in reality, there is still a big problem with the implementation and the enforcement of the RSPO.
Well, then I will put that to Darrel in just a moment. But Andrew, if I could come to you first of all, this idea of sustainability, because the alternatives are, by all accounts, much worse in terms of the damage they might do and the cost to the world. Is it workable? In fact, is it working at all at the moment? What do you think?
Well, I've been at the front line of conservation of tropical forests for 40 years, and I have to tell you, conservation isn't working. Rainforests have been destroyed on a massive scale in the last 4 decades, particularly in Southeast Asia and, of course, in the Amazon. And the reason is simple. Governments put up about 1 billion a year to try and save rainforests, and the value of the exported commodities that are responsible for most rainforest destruction is about 150 billion a year. So it's a sort of David and Goliath problem. We have to find a new way to get a dialogue with these huge companies that have much more resources than conservation can possibly throw at them. And we have to work with them and not completely against them. We have to work with them to find that solution.
But when it comes to palm oil in particular, because there are many other reasons why the rainforests have been depleted, we can't go into those on this particular program. When it comes to sustainable palm oil, is that just a drop in the ocean?
I disagree with that. Let me disagree with you. No, let me disagree with you. There aren't many other reasons why rainforests are being destroyed. Almost 70% of the destruction of rainforests is caused by these commodities, which is palm oil, paper and pulp, soy, and beef and leather. Those are the ones that are responsible. And that's what we have to concentrate on to get the biggest part of this problem solved.
Okay, well, that's not entirely palm oil, but I take your point. Do you think what Darrel's group is doing is worth anything?
Oh, indeed it is. I mean, the sad part is that despite all Darrel's work, only about 20% of production of palm oil is certified. If you look at the science, certification does reduce deforestation, but the problem is that only about 1% of Indonesia's forests are on certified land, because where certified palm oil is produced, the forest is already gone in most cases. So it's a step in the right direction. It has also stimulated the Indonesians themselves to start coming up with their own standard, the ISPO standard, Indonesian Sustainable Palm Oil, but that's got a long way to go to reach the high standards that RSPO is calling for.
Okay, but Helen here, a century ago, 230,000, maybe 250,000 orangutans, now down to just above 50,000, 60, 65,000 or something like that. Yes. Is there any hope with the plans that you're hearing here?
I think it's very true to say that palm oil is not the only threat facing orangutans. In recent history, it has been a primary threat facing their habitat and has been a major driver for deforestation in Sumatra and Borneo, the only 2 islands in the world where orangutans are found. I think we're seeing, as Andrew's alluded to, a situation where a lot of the forest that is available for development has already gone. We're undertaking a lot of work to try and protect the last remaining standing forests, but also to reclaim and restore oil palm plantations, returning it back into rainforest.
We're talking about an area 5 times the size of Switzerland, I think it mentioned. If no more palm oil plantations were built now, how much of its original habitat would the orangutan have left?
That's a difficult question to answer, to be honest, because a lot of recent developments in sort of population monitoring science have found that orangutans are actually spreading into habitats where they were previously presumed or known not to exist. So they're actually quite an adaptable species in that sense. But I think beyond just making sure that no more trees fall, we need to be bringing forests back, and that's also being brought up as a key strategy to fight global climate change.
Are you worried about what would replace palm oil?
Certainly, absolutely. We are not an anti-palm oil organisation, we're anti-deforestation. And as we know, as we've heard, palm oil is a very productive crop. If palm oil's not being produced on this land, something else will be.
Darrel, I'll come to you in a minute, but I see Rolf sort of looking like he wants to jump in at this particular point, so I'll allow you to do that. Please.
Thank you. So I wanted to comment on what you were saying. Like, palm oil in itself is not the big problem. And also, we as Friends of the Earth groups, environmentalists, you could say, we are not against palm oil, but we are against the expansion of palm oil. And the expansion, just the rate you see the use of palm oil growing at the moment, you can be sure that it's going to expand into the rainforest, because where else is it going to go? So any expansion of palm oil, new plantations being built, are going to be built in the rainforest. So
well, let's put
honest,
that point to Darrel, and then you can carry on if you like. So where is it going to go if it doesn't go into the rainforest?
Well, the story is quite different in other parts of the world. So there's 50 or so countries grow palm oil, oil palm, and in the past, yes, I would say it would go into forests, but there are many countries now and industries now who are members of RSPO or stakeholders of RSPO. They are thinking of how to expand in a much better way. Yeah, so avoiding forests, going for example, in Colombia, they're going for ex-cattle area, or in Brazil, also ex-cattle area, for example. In Africa, they may be taking over other commodities that are less profitable, like cocoa, for example, or coffee even. So those are the areas that we hope to steer the growth of the industry, if needed, to these kind of areas. And
so prior to this idea, it was a rape of the land, wasn't it? And now people have a little bit of a conscience, or they're just seeing their product in danger of perhaps being forced out of the market because people don't like it, what it does environmentally. It was rape and greed before, wasn't it, of the land?
I think in general, all commodities were raping assets, natural assets, right? So, but now I think, especially for palm oil, the reputation has been hit badly. Companies know that they suffer the severe consequences in the markets because if they're caught red-handed, especially with regards to deforestation.
Okay, so in terms of the penalties they may face, let's go back to the case mentioned by Rolf. When he was in Borneo not so very long ago, he came across a group of people who were about to be moved off their land because of a palm oil company coming in, and this company, he says, was a member of your organization.
So can I just make a quick response to that?
That's what I'm asking for,
yes,
yeah.
Okay, so first of all, let me just say I'm one of those people who I'm local. I'm a Bornean by birth. I'm Kadazan from Borneo. I live there, and I know communities who gain or positively benefit from palm oil and negatively impacted by palm oil. I'd like, well, if it's possible for Rolf to tell me who these companies are, I'll be very happy to follow up. Those who know me and what we do, we do take action. And of course, the maximum action we can take is we get these members, errant members, out of the RSPO. That in itself is not such a big problem. The problem is when they are left out of the RSPO, the markets will respond. Markets have responded very aggressively to those who have been suspended from the RSPO.
Okay, well, we won't go into detail on this program. Rolf, you and Darrel should communicate about this one. Andrew, when it comes to something like, and I know your rainforest is your area of expertise, but when it comes to sort of picking up on other land, is that possible, do you think?
Well, there is a huge amount of degraded land around the world, probably 40 million hectares in Southeast Asia, well, in Indonesia alone, and the same in Brazil. There's a lot of land available, but it's quite hard to identify land, who owns it, who you have to deal with, and what land is available in large areas, so 100,000 hectare chunks. That's what the industry needs to grow these plants. But what we cannot really do is to carry on tearing down beautiful rainforests to make new plantations. That really has to stop, and stop quickly, because it totally devastates the natural environment, the water supplies, it heats up the atmosphere, and of course it releases vast amounts of smoke, which will make it impossible for Indonesia to meet its commitments to end climate change. And we're all responsible because they're using this stuff. In the European Union, half of the palm oil coming into the European Union ends up in petrol tanks in cars. And that's to try and reduce emissions in Europe, but it's creating emissions in Asia.
So hang on,
seems to be a very...
the European Union says it wants to end the use of palm oil by 2030. Is that going to do any good, in your opinion?
Well, it doesn't make sense to put palm oil in a petrol tank, that's for sure, unless that palm oil is grown on areas that were deforested many, many years ago and meets the sort of RSPO sustainability standards. If we can have sustainable palm oil going into petrol tanks, well, maybe, but we should move all production towards high sustainability standards. So yes, it'll put pressure on the suppliers, and of course Malaysia and Indonesia are not happy about the European Union's threat to remove it from half of its imports.
Rolf, I saw you shaking your head at that. I will come to you in a second, but Helen, you've been waiting to say something for some time.
I absolutely agree with what Andrew was saying about the palm oil being used as a biofuel. It's perverse almost that forests are being cleared and thereby creating more carbon emissions.
But what about this idea of wasteland being used? Why isn't it happening at the moment?
Well, I think historically there's been a preference by companies, by palm oil companies, to be given their permits on land that has forest on it, so they can be clearing the hardwoods, selling those off into international markets while they wait for their oil palm plantations to become profitable. So it offsets the costs of setting up a plantation, and oftentimes, as Andrew was alluding to, there's less sort of ownership conflict around rainforest areas as opposed to previously cleared areas. But something that's we really should remember is that the Indonesian government themselves, they have great ambitions to grow the size of the palm oil industry, but they recognise that they can do that without expanding the plantations. There's this moratorium in place, no new permits for oil palm plantations, and some of the ones that have been granted already are being reviewed. They can do this by increasing productivity on the plantations that already exist.
Rolf, you can say what it was you wanted to say in just a second, but let me ask you this. The palm oil industry is in the crosshairs at the moment of the environmental groups worldwide. If it wasn't palm oil, if sustainability came along here, the target would be elsewhere. So it's a shifting picture, and one that is not going to be resolved in any way to suit people like yourself.
Absolutely, there are solutions. So the good news is that like 20, 30 years ago, we did not use any palm oil. Did your mother use palm oil when she made cookies? Did you use palm oil to make a pizza? The reason we are using it...
My mum never made a pizza.
Oh, that's about time. The reason we are using so much palm oil is because we are using it factory product. And the main reason we are using palm oil and not other oils, because there are plenty of other oils we could be using, is because it's the cheapest oil that we can use. And the same goes for the degraded lands. Of course, there are degraded lands, but as Helen was rightly saying, aren't going there because it's most profitable to go into the rainforest.
Now, what I'm saying to you is if it isn't palm oil, then you'll pick something else that you don't like.
Well, what I think is that the Western world should be responsible for their own food production and for their own biofuels production. And that means no palm oil, because we don't have it here. So if we need a lot of vegetable oils, then Europe should be taking its own responsibility to grow that on its own area. And the least should be taking responsibility to grow. So that means palm oil isn't
Not a
really
bad
necessary.
idea, though, Darrel, is it? You know, if Europe uses it, why doesn't it grow its own? Palm oil is very cheap. That's why people go for it. All of those arguments.
Yeah, but I think there's enough studies, neutral studies done that have looked at the scenarios where, if you leave palm oil out for Europe, what would happen? And you would see an unintended consequence on land use. Rapeseed oil would continue to be used, and it will expand to an area that's much larger than it already is, 4 times larger, I think. And I don't think Europe has that land, unless you want to sacrifice equally important areas in Europe for rapeseed or for another commodity. And let's see it this way, right? So I do the work I do because I think palm oil has been responsible for deforestation, no doubt about it. But I also do it hoping that I would inspire, or our efforts would inspire the other commodities. So Andrew mentioned there was 4 other commodities that are, involved in deforestation. And the number one by far is beef. Now, it's hard to campaign against beef, hard to tell someone say no to beef, easier to say no to palm oil, but it's number 1. So what we try to do is, yes, we're going to take responsibility of all this. We'll hold these guys to the standards that we have, but we hope to inspire the other commodities too.
And as the world uses more and more palm oil, and as the pressure comes on people in Indonesia not to deforest there, countries such as Liberia are starting to grow. They are completely outside your organization at the moment, as far as I know, because it's supposed to be a cowboy operation there.
No. We are in talks.
You think you have some kind of control there?
No, we don't have control. No, we can't control any country because it's all voluntary, what we do. But we do engage with the government in Liberia.
The government in Liberia doesn't give a damn at the moment.
No, I think that would be generalizing it. I have spoken to them, and a lot of them do sincerely want this balance of development that they need.
Well, there are so many reports of big companies coming in, pushing communities away, and the government there, Helen Sirleaf, whoever it happens to be, doesn't seem to mind too much. And then it's going to go to South America, am I right?
No, there's other bits of Africa that are considering palm oil as well. West Africa is the origin of palm oil, so that's where it's going to also continue to grow, probably replace the other commodities.
I will come to you. I'm not sure I've got that much time, because I want to ask Helen to tell us what the future is, because we've talked about communities, but you represent the orangutan. Yep, 65,000 only of them left. What is the future for them with plans like Darrel's or without responsible palm oil operators? What happens?
I think if we were seeing a scenario of business as usual, palm oil companies continuing to deforest to historical rates, the orangutans would be, there'd be nothing much we could do to save them at that point. I think what we're seeing now is there are a lot of companies making commitments to the RSPO, to the Palm Oil Innovation Group, no deforestation commitments, NDPE commitments, there's no deforestation, no peat, no exploitation. And these companies are working towards those commitments. In some cases, we can say not quickly enough, or not robustly enough, or not transparently enough, but in general, there is a good movement forwards on those commitments. And we're also looking at creative ways to bring together conservation and development. You don't have to have one or the other. You can have both.
Why do you love them so much?
Well, I think orangutans are a rather special ambassador for the Indonesian rainforest and Malaysian rainforest where they're found. In the Loisa ecosystem in Sumatra, it's the only rainforest where you find orangutans, tigers, elephants and rhinos all living together under one forest ecosystem. Something we're doing at the moment is buying up oil palm plantations that are right on the edge of that ecosystem. We're reclaiming them and restoring them back to rainforest, including a social innovation element there, so growing permaculture type of cropping systems, so we give local communities an alternative livelihood. There are some interesting things that can be done.
That's extraordinary. So do you think the population decline could be reversed?
Oh yes, absolutely. I wouldn't be doing this if not. We're pragmatic optimists, I like to say.
And you'd like to work with people like Darrel here and his group, Friends of the Earth.
Absolutely.
And Andrew, everybody's pulling together.
Absolutely, yes. I mean, there's always a lot of differing opinions about certain details around all this, but in general, I believe we are all on the same team.
Okay, let's have a homage to the orangutan as we go. I asked you why you love them so much. We've got about 45 seconds. Tell us why they are so special.
Well, they share almost 97% of our DNA. They're incredibly intelligent animals. They have beautiful bonds between a mother and a baby orangutan. A baby will stay with their mother for 7 or 8 years. If you look into the eyes of an orangutan, you'll see that they have souls and intelligence just like us. And frankly, there's enough room on this planet for us and them and all the other species. We shouldn't have to choose.
And they're wise and gentle.
Very wise and gentle.
Oh, that's fabulous. Thank you. Listen, thanks very much. I hope we've cleared up a few of the myths surrounding palm oil and deforestation, and good luck to every one of you who is actually trying to sort of make, well, not just the areas where the orangutans live, but the whole of the rainforest better for every creature that calls it home. I have to say, I went to Borneo principally to see an orangutan, didn't get a chance. They only come out at night, I'm told, and they didn't come out on the nights when I was out walking and looking for them. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you for watching Roundtable on YouTube, TRT World YouTube on Roundtable is there. You can check it anytime you like. Plenty of other programs besides this one. I hope you've enjoyed this though, and thank you to my guests. Bye-bye for now.